Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome. If it is your 20-plus time of listening to one of these, welcome back. Hey, thanks for coming along on the journey of this podcast that is designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every week with Craig Brown. He is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm great, Thom. It's good to be with you. It's the week of Veterans Day, which has nothing to do with my background, but thanks for all of you out there that have served our country. We do appreciate it.
So this episode might air a little bit later, but we are recording this in November. But you're not sitting in the cold of Michigan this November.
Oh, this is really harsh because now everybody's going to get after me, Thom. Yes, turns out we're at one of the conferences. This is the PIPLMX conference, and they chose to be in wonderful San Diego with the coldest weather storm to hit the Midwest and New England in maybe ever.
Yeah, I heard my daughter lives in Chicago. They said it was a record cold in Chicago. And I thought, boy, she picked the right time to move to the Midwest.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is up there. There's over 10 inches of snow at my place. So
I just
happen when I'm not there.
I just missed you in San Diego. I was there yesterday and it was like 75, 80 degrees. So I know that you're living it up quite well at this conference that you're at. And you're going to actually do a live interview today with somebody who is also attending the conference. Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't know if Oleg will get home either, but I guess we'll find out, right? There's just plenty of snow out there.
Well, if you guys get stuck in San Diego, I'm not going to cry for you. How's that? So
we may be divorced, but never mind.
Hey, I travel all the time, and I'm very fortunate. The airlines usually get me where I'm trying to go, no matter what's going on. So most of the time you do get home. So each week, Craig and I try to bring to this podcast really interesting interviews and other ideas to help all of the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today's going to be no different. Today we have Oleg Shilovitsky, and I actually met him at the IPX conference. We actually sat together at that conference. And so I'm really excited that we have him here on the show. He is the co-founder and CEO of OpenBOM. So, Oleg, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited.
So,
besides we surviving 12 inches of sun in San Diego, right?
That's a great line. 12 inches of sun in San Diego today. That's a good one. I'm gonna steal that one, and I might even give you credit for it when I use it. So, Oleg, why don't you tell us your background? What did you do originally, and how did you lead up to the founding of OpenBOM?
Yes, thank you. I've been around of product lifecycle management for the last 20 years, working for several companies. Between them, the System. I worked for Autodesk, was involved in few startups. And at the end, I decided to found OpenBOM. Besides doing development and working on engineering on the customer side, I also was involved in writing a blog. So my blog, maybe you had a chance to read it, called Beyond PLM. So it's a daily blog that I'm writing for the last 11 years. So been involved in PLM communities, and I like this space. It's kind of Hotel California. It's you can check out, but you cannot leave.
Well, that's an excellent point. So people have been accusing me, Oleg, of not retiring or a failing retirement. Maybe I'm just tipped into the wrong hotel. Okay, I got it now. So you mentioned your blog, Oleg. I was taking a look at some of the topics, and yesterday at one of the sessions here, the discussion was about the single source of truth. And I found one of your blogs about the digital PLM continuum. And a lot of us in the past 2 decades, we were working on getting to a single database, everything's in it, then we can make better decisions. And in my experience, I found that just isn't practical. Sounds like you've reached a similar conclusion. Can you expand on that a little bit? Can there be a single source of the truth, or does there need to be?
Sure. I think it's a great question and great point exactly in this time. So what happens is that technology has evolved for the last 15 years. And remember, 20 years ago, we've been driving with paper maps. Mm-hmm. And that was a single version of truth, because that's the map that tells me where to go. So,
yeah, and sometimes it wasn't truthful. Sometimes it was wrong.
But it was the best you have.
But okay,
right?
Fair enough.
So if the best I have is my database when I stored my drawings or 3D models, mm-hmm. that's the best single version of truth that I have. But if one of the engineers working on a CAD system, despite that you check in the model, check it out, or made it editable and changed, that's your database already not a single version of truth, right? Mm-hmm. Because somebody is just not following this rule.
Right.
So what happens with driving, that now we have driving applications, and driving applications accumulating data from multiple places. So when you look on your Google map, the single version of truth is distributed because you have some information coming from your mapping application for traffic application, some information in your digital cockpit in the car. And again, can we speak about cars? I think it's very relevant. So my digital cockpit in the car brings information about traffic, brings information about gas stations and prices, brings information about many other things. So is it a single version of truth? Yes, I'm looking at my digital cockpit in the car. This is my single version of truth, but information is distributed. And the same in manufacturing. So can we put everything in a single database? I don't think so. And I don't think that many people care. So people that are asking about single version of truth in PLM, they certainly care about single version of truth, but how? I don't think that's important. It's a single database or not.
Like the Google Map example you use, we've learned to trust it because it's showing us information in a context. And because it's reliable, there's the speed trap I just went by, or here's a slowdown due to an accident, or maybe it's just congestion. It's right. And as you gain confidence in it, then the confidence in a view, if you will, then this view into several databases that are homologated or combined somehow into a single view is what you rely on. I do think PLM is ready for this view, management of views, might be another way to say it. Just say, well, I'm making this kind of decision. What's the data that's relevant to that decision, and put it all in a context together.
What is very important is that not only databases, it's also people. Because, for example, I'm using Waze for driving. I don't know if you know the application.
Yeah.
So what Waze does is to bring information from other drivers.
Yeah.
So now in your decision-making process in PLM, you would like to get information from somebody. It might be not recorded in any database, but you can bring it from somebody else.
Yeah, and so then you're connecting people in an intelligent way or in a relevant way to the decision you're trying to make. So you blog about several topics, and I want to pick off on a couple of them. One that we also hear at these conferences that we all go to is software as a service, as a trend. And initially that was, well, somebody does it centrally and then you rent time. It's like a utility. But I think it's going to enable other things as well. You made some comments about software as a service, and it really seems to be prevalent everywhere. And in fact, your example with Google or Waze is exactly that, right? So how does PLM benefit from SaaS, software as a service?
Yeah, great questions. Software as a service started actually a long time ago. So if you go to examples of Salesforce.com, it's basically end of 90s, right? So it's almost 20 years now. So manufacturing and PLM started to discover software as a service later in the game because of different reasons. The data is complex. The industry is a little bit more defensive maybe than CRM. The exposure. So there are different factors.
Yeah, I mean, product security, at least in the car companies where I came from, it will, not many people knew the final shape and the final colors, right? Everybody knew the interior stuff that nobody cares about because it doesn't affect the sale. But if it affects the sale of the vehicle, the style of it, or how beautiful it was, or whatever, that stuff was only known by a few hundred people, right?
Agreed.
And so security in SaaS, I think, is a big deal. And I don't think it's well understood. You know, is it secure or can it be secure? Those kind of questions.
It is important. It's sometimes red herring.
Okay, now you're gonna have to explain why.
Yes, because of different reasons, because of the complexity of organization. So sometimes it's very easy to bring security point. Nobody will be asking, nobody will be arguing, and nobody will take a chance to say anything against, because you don't want to be the person that made this information available to anybody else. You don't want to take any risks.
So that's interesting. So people, even if you had the service to share things, people won't share things because they don't want to be in trouble.
Yeah, and I can tell you something. When people discussing cloud security, I don't know, maybe Thom will have to cut this part. But you know, there are two very easy ways to get any information from the company without getting in the cloud services. This is sex and money. So this too.
Okay, you heard it here first. I'm sure we'll leave it, but go right ahead.
That's the first time I've heard PLM and sex and money in the same sentence in all of these podcasts. It's never come up before.
So
you asked to be funny, so that's what you get. So careful about asking.
This might end up being the highest heard blog we've had or podcast we've had so far. I mean,
but the point is that the weakest security point
is the human.
People. It's human.
Yeah,
it's people.
Right.
So if somebody stuck USB stick in the machine, you know, you might not prevent it. So, you know, if your server is in your room, not everyone knows how to get, because the password is written somewhere around.
Written on it, right.
It's easier than get to Amazon server. Go figure out where is this Amazon server now. So it's a question. That's why sometimes it's red herring.
Well, I think it's more of a red herring than ever. And I used to deal with these same kinds of debates inside the big company, and it was always, you know, it was a combination of where are the passwords, and then it was also a combination of you know, the real cyber threats are more of the kind that, you know, prevent you to use your system, right? They just flood it with traffic and it becomes overwhelmed, right? As opposed to somebody actually stealing the shape of the brand new car or whatever. So,
but security, again, let's be serious. Security is a big issue, and that's why I think there is a good trend in seeing how large cloud service providers companies are investing in security.
Well, and you know, it's interesting. I'm more familiar with Amazon than the others, but they go out of their way to make it clear, you know, in effect, we're providing the plumbing. We're not going to provide the intelligence of the application that brings the, you know, we talk about data coming from multiple places, that brings it together and put it in a view. That's the responsibility of the app writer, whoever that is, you, me, somebody else. And so it's interesting to draw that distinction. We're just bringing you efficient plumbing, right? That's the way Amazon likes to talk about it. And then security, well, you can pay for it in the plumbing, or you can pay for it in the application, or if you're really paranoid, you can do it both places, right? Exactly. It's up to you. So you mentioned cloud offhandedly, and it sure, you know, I retired about a year ago, and so cloud at that time, something I read about, but I didn't spend any of my energy on it. It was somebody else's job where I came from. But it does seem to be really a disruptor. There's a small startup that got my attention, and they're all about taking advantage of the cloud technology. What's your view of cloud technology? Is it a disruptor in the PLM space, or is it just another thing we're going to have to figure out how to take advantage of? But will it really change PLM, or will it just make it cheaper?
I think it will change PLM in many ways. And at OpenBOM, we take significant advantage of cloud technologies from any aspects. And there are two, at least, that I would like to bring up. Okay. So first, you practically mentioned, you said, can make it cheaper. You know, the companies are looking for affordable solutions, even large companies. So you can agree or disagree, but I think regardless of the size of the company, they'll be concerned about the cost, right?
Fortune 50 do their own clouds because of security. That's at least the reason. Now, whether it's a valid reason, I think what I've noticed in disruption is the reason's changing.
Yes.
And it's changing because the cloud providers are getting smarter. You know, the government just awarded its huge cloud contract called JEDI. And it's interesting to me that it's now there that they even are having the discussion, and they went ahead and did it. So I think everybody's getting a little bit smarter, right? That's part of what's going on.
So there are two things. First is the efficiency and the economy of scale.
Right.
So when your PLM server utilization is under 10%, you've been thinking how to put it and share it with the other resources that you will be using. But here's an interesting thing. To do this, to make it happen, the architecture of PLM should change, because the current systems are built for single servers.
Yes.
So when you take existing system and put it in the cloud, and this is what PLM companies were doing for the last more or less 7, 8, maybe a little bit more years. So let's take existing system and put them on Amazon. Great. But the problem that you don't like a bill that you will get after, because you will have to include the cost of Amazon in the way you sell your PLM services, unless you will pass this to customers that, by the way, many vendors are doing today, but nobody much know. It's not very much published. So, oh yeah, you can license application as a service, and this is a software as a service business model. But by the way, the bill for Amazon will come as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of thing. So the architecture of applications should change, and that's why it's changed everything. Now there is a second aspect where companies will be able to leverage the cloud. It's a data sharing and data connections. Everyone likes to speak about connected systems, but when you take two databases isolated and put it in the Amazon, they will not be connected magically just because they run on the two database servers on the Amazon. So something should happen in this application so they will become connected. And it means re-architecturing applications. So as a result of this, business model will change because of economy of share and economy of scale. And the second, the functionality that will come to the applications will be different, because before, if I want to share information with supplier, I need to export Excel. So now I can share it like Google spreadsheet. And by the way, when you put your database on the cloud, you will not be able to share it tomorrow because it's the same application running from Amazon server.
We've been having debates on these podcasts, or maybe just discussions about the overuse of Excel and when are we ever going to replace it. So it's just interesting that you brought it up again, but we won't go there. Yeah, so software as a service, cloud technology, the notion of being in a single database. If any of you listening are thinking that these things aren't going to somehow change each other, that's part of why I like talking with you all again and a few others. It's clearly here. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to figure out how to take advantage of it. By that I mean some industrial giant, and small startups, especially people that don't have to pay for the capital for large amounts of equipment for manufacturing. So the maker, people using 3D printing to make parts. I think the whole economy of PLM is going to get turned on its head. What do you think? Same thing? Something different?
I think there are a lot of changes that will be happening in the next 10 years in manufacturing and in PLM. And you mentioned 3D printers. It's right, because the technologies are changing. But also think about contract manufacturing that becomes more available, because it's something that we can do in a much more easy way. But I would like to point on the very important thing that will happen as a result of this transformation in manufacturing. As a consumers today, we have a lot of power. We go to supermarket and I can check how much will cost this particular thing in all other stores. So now think of manufacturing company. So your ability to understand actually what is the impact of supply chain, what is the impact of parts, who was buying these parts and how to buy them, and 70% of parts either outsourced or standard parts. So it's a huge impact. So your ability to collect this information and get the intelligence, it's probably like nearer to the fax machine, because you work with contractors and suppliers that you work with, and if you're a very large company, you have your own supply chain system. But if you're starting as a middle-sized company, so you work with your contractors, you have no idea what impact your cost and how you can change it. So think about Amazon ecosystem.
Right.
And now think about manufacturing in 10 years, it's probably will look similar to what we have as Amazon.
So Oleg, this is a fascinating discussion. One of the things I admire about your blog is you talk a lot about what might happen in the future. And we were just talking about the next decade. But what's your prediction for next year, 2020 and beyond? What I noticed a couple things you were mentioning, three main areas. Can you elaborate on those for us?
Yeah, sure. I think 2020 is very interesting. It's not only because it's changed from 1 to 2. Mm-hmm. It's also because I see it as a next step in the cloud development in PLM. So, and to explain it, I will go back almost 10 years ago, mm-hmm. when everyone was saying that the cloud is not possible for manufacturing companies. And then it took one large company in this domain to come up and say, we will do everything on the cloud. And that was Carl Bass with Autodesk in 2011. Mm-hmm. And so after he said we can do it in the cloud, we can see the trajectory of all companies starting to come up. Mm-hmm. So that was the influence. And again, we got everything hosted on the cloud, which is perfectly fine. This is the second stage. So the first stage was to have a company servers. And the second stage was to take this company servers to the Amazon. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to the third step. And the next stage will be the multi-tenant cloud application. Okay. So the event that happened 2 weeks ago is PTC was saying that the multi-tenant cloud applications, this is the future, and this is the reason why they acquired technology of Onshape.
Yeah, right.
So that trigger will impact, and again, it's very in the space of publications and media and analysts. You know, mm-hmm. speak about next year is very dangerous because it's going to happen and everyone will remember it.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to say how it will happen in the next year, but I'm pretty sure that event of PTC acquiring Onshape will echo in everything and the old developments of the PLM, because this is the major event.
Yeah. So I work off and on with the SimData folks, and this is interesting you bring this up. That was a topic at one of our last staff meetings, partly because it just surprised us, the timing of it surprised us, right? Sometimes you think you see this stuff coming and you can say, well, yeah, in the next year or two, depends on the economy, you know, we say things like that. This was a bit faster than that, right? So it's interesting. I'm still out of touch with
multi-tenant.
Say it carefully. Multi-tenant.
Multi-tenant, yes.
Meaning multiple computers helping serve the single application. Is that what that means?
That's kind of thing, but also data sitting in the databases that not belonging single database to the company. So let me crush you with another term if you want.
Okay.
So it will be a little bit upscale. Okay. So it's a polyglot persistence.
Okay.
So the polyglot persistence is something.
This is good for the mathematicians in the crowd, right?
It could be. But that you think about, it was a time that we've been writing applications in the single programming language. So mm-hmm. this was written in Fortran. This is a COBOL, and that was the C++. And now we're writing applications in all languages, just because one language is better for UI and another language is better for service.
That's a good point.
Okay, now let's think about databases. Before, we've been building PDM and PLM systems in Oracle because IT, like you at GM, were approving Oracle, and mm-hmm. it's good to go on Oracle.
Right.
But when databases and everything moves to the cloud, maybe you can optimize something so you will have multiple databases for different jobs because they tune. Mm-hmm. And this is how applications like Google and Facebook are running for already a couple of decades.
Interesting.
So polyglot persistence will come to PLM because for some records in the product data, I will be using one database, and for some other information in the product lifecycle management, I will be using another database. So this is how we build up.
So if I was 20 years old and a pretty good student, and I needed to understand more what you just said, choosing the right language for the right problem, in essence, what would you recommend I do? Because there's a lot of things happening. You know, a lot of people, and I used to work in Cambridge, Massachusetts. You know, I dealt with computer scientists before we were calling them computer scientists back in the late 70s and early 80s. We did a lot of language design to the specific problem, whether it was flight control or whether it was compilers and all that kind of thing, right? So what would you recommend to the 20-year-old who's in school, who was maybe aware of the technology of the last 10 years, but maybe is having trouble understanding what we just said to each other about say it again.
Polyglot persistence.
There you go. Okay, so this is important.
I have a good news for you. Because they're already there. They're already in the place where they can learn about this because they Google everything from the beginning.
Well, that's a good point.
And then you Google it and you will find it. And how did you find my articles? If I need to find something on my blog, I Google my own blog.
Yeah,
so that's
you
so
trust
already there.
You trust the search algorithms and you ignore the advertisements. One of my frustrations.
You want to go there?
No, I really no. Let's not go there. That'll take another hour. But that's good advice. Use your favorite search engine to understand this terminology, and then adjust your coursework maybe a little.
And social networks. They work with peers. They talk. They text. That's the way they communicate.
Yeah, that's something that I probably am too old. I have yet to really embrace those kind of social technologies, partly because I just don't want it to be a waste of time.
I have a good news for you as well for this one.
Okay, what's that?
I recently read an article that there is a strong trend for people to work longer.
Well, that goes against that word retirement that I keep failing at. But well, anyways, Oleg, it's been a joy chatting with you. I've enjoyed it over the past years when we've seen each other, and I think a couple of months, maybe a year down the road, we'll have to do this again. We'll see if your predictions are right. It's always fun to come back and say, well, now at the end of 2020, let's see what happens. So anyways, thank you so much. And Thom, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. So Oleg, I always like to take these conversations. I always like to take them back to, what does this matter to the listener? So you and Craig were talking a lot about the cloud. You talked a lot about cost savings for companies, about new technologies, about efficiencies. But I know one thing is true, and that is change often brings disruption. And it doesn't just bring it to the industry, it brings it to people's careers. So how does everything you've talked about, how does that impact the people who are listening? And what do they need to look forward to when it comes to their skills, their job descriptions, and their career paths?
I think what is important for people today is how to take a change. And this is becomes more important than ever because decisions that were taken in the past were for 10 years, for 20 years. Today, everything is going faster. So we are going to see a faster changes in everything, in technology, in application, and we are going to see a faster changes in PLM as well. So, and that's the most interesting part in my view, because when I talk to our customers, when I talk to people that read in my blog, they're telling me, we don't want 20 years old stuff. We are looking for something new. So yesterday on this show, I was talking to somebody and she said, again, I want to mention the name of the company, but she said, we just looking how to work differently because an average age of the people in our company is 25 years. So we don't want to use old stuff. We just don't know how to do it. And they are taking it fast and they want to take it fast. So I think there are two things that will be impacted the most is the fastest changes and need to be ready for this. And the second, how people will be trained and how people will study and learn about new stuff. It will happen much faster than that.
Well, Oleg, thank you for being part of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. If somebody's listening to this and they want to contact you or they want to find out about OpenBOM, how do they find you?
It's very easy. It's openbom.com. And my email is oleg@openbom.com.
That is easy. That's awesome. Well, again, thank you for being here on the show. Join us next week, everybody, because we will have more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.